You are listening to Let's Talk Trio on podcasts. Keep up with the latest episodes by downloading the Podbean app or stream episodes via our social media accounts. Search for Let's Talk Trio on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This episode is sponsored by Student Access. Student Access, the leader in Trio software. Student Access is an online database solution that allows Trio programs to track their students' information, connect with students by text messages, streamline the APR, and work from anywhere, all online, with automatic updates for changes from the Department of Education. Their technical support team includes former Trio staff and has over 50 years of combined experience working with Trio. Make it easier to focus on your priority, the students. For more information and to request a free demo, visit their website at www.studentaccess.com or call them toll-free at 1-800-801-1232. That website again is www.studentaccess.com or 1-800-801-1232. Be sure to share your favorite episodes on your social media by tapping that share button. This is a great way to support the podcast. Now here's your host, Juan Rivas.
Thank you, Amelia, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, listener, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Trio. I am your host, Juan Rivas. In today's episode, we have Jennifer Franco, who is a board member of the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the advancement of Latino professionals. Jennifer's on the podcast to talk about her educational journey, why she champions Trio, and involvement with various boards. So coming up in just a bit, Jennifer Franco. A huge thanks to our sponsors, Angelica Villalpando, Rosario Riley, Dr. Ryan Barone, Dr. Jamie Motley, Angelica Valdez, Felicia Rivera, Jaded Electronics, TrioJoblist.com, NOSOTROS Education Center, The Trio Store, powered by Proforma. Visit www.thetriostore.com, your source for Trio graduation stoles. And Student Access. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can be a sponsor of the podcast. Head on over to Patreon and search for Let's Talk Trio. Choose one of 4 patron levels. You can support this podcast for as little as $1 a month. $1 a month goes a long way in supporting this podcast. If you own a business and would like to run an ad on our podcast, send us a message for details. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast PayPal account. Our handle is @Let'sTalkTrio. One more time, that handle is @Let'sTalkTrio. Any amount is truly appreciated. If you would like to nominate a participant, staff, alumni, or advocate to be on the podcast, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. Don't forget to include their contact information. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. Again, a great episode featuring Jennifer Franco, who is part of the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement. So please sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, Trio Nation. My guest on the Let's Talk Trio podcast is a board member of the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement, also known as ACE, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the advancement of Latino professionals. Also, the Code Your Dreams, a philanthropic fundraising service that teaches students computer science so that they may be equipped to build applications that drive positive change in communities. And United Latinas Incorporated, an organization that empowers Latinas through community and collaboration, speaking opportunities, entrepreneurship, and leadership development and training. Our guest has also served as the employer engagement for St. Xavier University, also as an academic advisor and for continuous improvement specialist for Dominican University. They obtained their Master of Arts in Women's Studies from Loyola University in Chicago, a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Government from Northeastern Illinois University, and an Associate of Arts from Wilbur Wright College. They are currently seeking their PhD at Loyola University Chicago. In their spare time, they like to spend time with their family. Welcome to the podcast, Jennifer Franco. Jennifer, welcome to the Let's Talk Trio podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. And, I'm very delighted to be here and just share a little bit of wisdom and hopefully, get to talk a little bit personally about what Trio is, what it does, and how we can move forward with all this.
That is wonderful. Thank you. It's so good to have you on the podcast. So you're from Chicago. How are things in Chicago right now?
Well, let me tell you, the weather here has been chilly and it's crazy because I feel like we just had summer and now it's like transition cold weather. But overall, very good. Chicago's always vibrant and upbeat. So I just feel that the only thing that constantly is a change is the weather. You never know what you're going to get.
Absolutely. I feel like it's like this in Colorado as well. For many colleges, the fall semester is already in full swing. So we're in the middle of the fall semester. I like to ask folks who are in higher education, do you segment your entire calendar year based on the academic calendar? Like, do you segment it by uh, fall, then spring, and then summer?
Yes, I think that a lot of us that are administrators or at least that have worked in education for quite some time, specifically higher ed, we tend to base our life on an academic calendar, right? We can't do planning if we have any other commitments that are not only professionally done, right? But as a student, mother, worker, whatnot, right? I do have to base it off the academic calendar to meet the rigorous deadlines that we have, not only to meet our personal deadlines, but also the students, right? Because we're there to support them.
Wonderful. Can you talk to us about your interests? What interest and hobbies do you have?
Yeah, so I have many interests. So I love real estate. I'm also like a binge watcher. I love watching stuff that has to do with like criminal investigations.
Ooh.
I think that has to do with wealth management is another hobby of mine. There's a really good one about wealth management in Netflix that I just started to pick up as something new, and
Mhm.
that's very important to me. And then a couple of things that I'm very interested about is just like entrepreneurship for women, specifically Latina women, and
Mhm.
how to get, out of that mind space where you're too nervous, or sometimes, that imposter syndrome kicks in and you don't want to take on that specific endeavor because you're too frightened to
Mm.
fail. Most of us don't start something because we are scared of failing, but failure is only a process of learning.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love how you summed that up. That failure, typically in the world of academia, failure is framed as this thing that once you fail at it, it's like you can't ever do it again, or it's framed as this thing that you should never approach again. And most of my career, I've taught or been working around kids that have really experienced failure and had to reframe it. So I'm glad that you're one of the educators that are going forward and saying, failure is part of our learning.
Yeah, I think when we look at success, a lot of us have this unfortunate idea that success is very linear, and it's not.
Mm. Hmm.
Success can have its ups and downs, its circles and whatnot, right? And I feel from that is how we learn and how we mature, right? And I see it a lot in our students. I used to be so focused on when I was a student in undergrad, so
Hmm.
focused on only being an A and B student, no less than that. Anything less than
Mm.
that, I always struggled with, getting past the fact that it was like a C, or maybe I've gotten a D. But I realized afterwards that I'm like, who's actually looking at those grades when I'm looking for an actual job when I'm in the workforce, right? I'm like, I
Mm,
don't
right.
think anyone's going to be looking at those D's or F's. And if they do, they
Right.
might want an explanation as to why, right? What was the reason that
Right.
you failed? But it's not like a make it or break it. I feel like there is a lot that you can come back from that and just learn from those experiences. And I feel that undergraduate school is basically for that, right? For your development. So even if you just get a C or a D, that's okay, right? You could just fix it the next time around or work on it and progress to that stage where you feel more comfortable in getting better, right? So the more we learn from those experiences, the better we become at something. So I feel like I've done a lot of that through trial and error, but I see it a lot with first gen undergrad students as well.
Absolutely. I think a lot of our first generation students need to hear that it's okay to fail. It's okay to take progress into our learning. I think that's not emphasized enough. I think this, like you said earlier, make it or break it type of format that we have in the universities discourages a lot of people. So absolutely agreed. Thank you. I was going to talk to you a little bit about, I go back to your interest. So you like the murder documentaries or the documentaries that talk about unsolved cases?
I think I like both. It's just such a weird plethora of what I like, but
There's
it's
such a
just,
wide range.
yes, I mean, it's very interesting because there's some things that you're not aware of, but I feel like just the whole ordeal about forensic science. It's just, I always wanted to go into the FBI. I actually did apply,
Mm-hmm.
got into OMP and all that. But during that time, there was the transition where Trump was taking over. So it was one of those situations where my application was taking more than what it should have been. So I
Mm-hmm.
was in need of a job. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to just have to move forward with another position. And I actually ended up in the educational world for quite some time. Otherwise, I would have worked,
With the
as an
FBI.
FBI, as a
Wow.
background investigator. Yes. Yes. So I have different various interests, and that was one of mine.
Wonderful. Actually, this is a wonderful segue to this next question because we really want to know about. Can you share with us your personal and educational journey from when you were little all the way to now? Like, how did that progress for you?
Yeah, so I struggled a lot when I was little because, as you know, I come from a immigrant family, Guatemala specifically, and one of the issues that they encountered here was that there wasn't a lot of good schools in the neighborhood that I was growing up in.
Mm,
And during that time, I was actually growing up in Albany Park, and a lot of the schools weren't as great as they are now.
hmm.
So my mother decided to send me somewhere else, a different neighborhood. And it was very difficult because she actually enrolled me in an all white school. And I was the
Oh,
only Latina there. Uh,
mm,
maybe two, three other African Americans. But yeah, the only Latina.
wow.
And it was a difficult process for me because I felt like I didn't belong. That refrán ni de aquí ni de allá.
Yeah,
It was
yeah, yeah, yeah.
great. It was like I was stuck in the middle. Like I didn't know if I
Mm,
belonged here or there. So the situation while growing up and getting educated was very difficult for me. One,
hmm.
because as you know, Spanish is my first language, and English is my second language. So it was just a difficult experience having to navigate my friendship, but also my cultura. And I think that's
Hmm.
what I kind of felt disheartened about when it came to education, because when we were studying sectors about, countries and different languages and whatnot, what a lot of it came up as was, I remember one specific experience that I can never, never, never take out of my mind was when we were celebrating Dia de los Muertos.
Hmm.
And, we were talking about Halloween and Dia de los Muertos, and they told us, bring something that represents you. Okay. So I decided to do an altar, right? And
Hmm.
bring that, una ofrenda, to
Yeah.
school and show everyone like all these cute little things that I had just created myself. Obviously, I was too young then, but with the support of my family. And then when I came in with that project, I remember a lot of my peers asking me, like, why are you making an ofrenda to
Mm,
someone that's already dead? And that kind of like really shook me to my core because I was under the impression everyone knew what it was. Like everyone did the same thing, right?
yeah.
And that's just, when you're young, you think everyone's just like you, this is just going to be like a cool thing you're going to share with your friends.
Right. Right.
And the situation ended up being more like I kind of felt very let down, very different. So that kind of just left a mark on me because a lot of the questions that were asked during that specific show and tell. So it just kind of like left me with a lot of self-doubt and insecurities, right? Almost to the point that I kind of like sometimes hid a lot of the things that I would eat or do, and
Mhm.
also made me reluctant to share my cultura, right? And then once in college, that was a complete different story. I
Mhm.
actually love college right off the bat. I felt like that was the space where I belong. I felt like I didn't belong in elementary school. I didn't belong in high school, but college was my jam. I always tell my oldest son, which he's going to be graduating from college soon too.
That's awesome.
I was like, college for me was like a mind-blowing experience. When you first put your foot in the door and you see those arches or those big doors wherever you go through, and it's just amazing. Like you see that campus, you breathe the air. There's just something different when you step into a college campus, and I can't really put my like a word to it, but I
Hmm.
remember that time and I was like, wow, this is college. This is where the grown-ups go to school. And I remember those labs, the classroom. I just fell in love with being independent and that I was just me, right?
Hmm.
And that
Hmm.
there was other people, other cultures. It was just so different from what I have experienced. I'm not going to say that everything was fine in
Sure,
college
sure.
because, we have sometimes those individuals that, kind of show us that, everything is not happy and dandy, but,
Oh,
it was
certainly.
experience that I had because it was just something that I couldn't believe it. And
Yeah.
because I was a very young mother during my high school years,
Hmm.
being in college just fortified my ambition to keep going and just
Wow.
securing, my diploma and making sure that I took advantage of each classroom that would enhance my skills. So, that is how I ended up, in higher education and just, experiencing it all.
So this is also kind of a segue question, but a follow-up too. So you were a non-traditional student heading into college.
Yes, that is correct.
Wow, that is wonderful. So can you talk to us more about your college experience? What was that whole kind of timeline like? Because that's 4 years of studying and having a child. I know firsthand. It was my sophomore year in college where my ex-partner and we ended up having our son. But that was very. I remember how that was. How was that for you? What was that experience like that for you?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that question because what I've seen a lot has been that individuals that enter college don't have the same support system as, a regular traditional undergraduate students. It is a little bit difficult. It was difficult my first year. I had to rely a lot on my familial support, and that was my mother and my aunt.
Hmm.
However, my husband was in the picture, but he also had to work, right? So it was just a difficult situation overall. However,
Hmm.
most of the support was coming from my mother,
Wow.
and just the experience itself was great because I was a mother already. All of my chosen institutions have been in the state of Illinois because I just couldn't go up and travel and leave. So that
Hmm.
was one of the situations where I was always bummed about not being able to go anywhere else. And I would hear all these stories about other individuals that have been to a college in Washington, D.C., or they did all these
Right.
things out of state. And I'm like, and I never could have been able to do that because, I was already an established non-traditional students. So for me, everything had to be in the state of Illinois.
Right.
However, the beauty of it all was that the more resilient I was in trying to obtain my education, the more I wanted to learn about other things that help support my professional journey. And a
Hmm.
lot of that stemmed from also the types of jobs that I was working. So my very first professional job was with a mom and pop individual. He was a self-made millionaire.
Oh,
He
wow.
actually had owned various properties around the Chicagoland area, in Puerto
Hmm.
Rico, and some out of the States. He was just a very knowledgeable man that was my mentor throughout my 2-year degree, which was my associate's degree, and then partially for my bachelor's degree as well. So
Hmm.
I was doing a lot of work for him, which was managing his rental units, also making sure that I did IRB research because he was also dabbling in scientific research. He also
Wow.
dabbled a little bit in the video gaming industry before. And
Wow.
so it was like I got like a glimpse at everything behind the scenes that I was like, wow, if this man can do so many things, so can I. And he saw the
Absolutely.
potential in me. So he allowed me to learn about real estate. I was just so blessed to have a mentor like him because he also showed me the ropes about wealth management and also how to get, rolling in that and paying attention to the stock market. I was like, what is the stock market? A lot of us in our first gen, we don't think about those things. We're just like,
No,
trying to hustle for the money.
absolutely. Like, working for the next paycheck. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But he was the first one to teach me about all these things, right? And I was very blessed to have an individual that was there not only to open up my horizons, but to give me the opportunities to dabble in those things. And that's how I ended up being in a real estate investor. I own actually 2 properties, units, and going on to my 3rd one. And it's been a blessing, actually. I love higher education. Education is just my drive, but as we all know, higher education is also the biggest underpaid job.
It really is.
I mean, we do a lot.
Right.
So, and that's why I have my real estate on the side, because I knew what I was getting myself into, knowing that, the salaries that we have to live with.
Good plan. Good plan. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Are you seeking guidance to enhance your TRIO project's effectiveness and success? Look no further. Nosotros Education Center, NEC, is here to empower your TRIO project with expert consulting services. NEC's mission is to promote the effectiveness and impact of TRIO programs. Since 2003, NEC has specialized in providing professional development and in-service staff trainings, allowable cost services, for TRIO projects across the country. The team at NEC, with over 60 years of combined TRIO experience, offers customized workshops and seminars for project staff, compliance assessments, external evaluations, working on and submitting APRs, database customization and training, developments of policies and procedures manuals, and project implementation or reorganization services. Additionally, NEC has secured over $774 million in federal funding with a 92% success rate through their live and on-demand proposal workshops, assistance with data collection and review, detailed technical reviews, and comprehensive proposal development services. Join the hundreds of colleges, agencies, and TRIO projects across the country who benefited from NEC's expertise. Nosotros Education Center, your partner in TRIO's project success. Visit their website at nosotros.edu.org. Again, that's nosotros.edu.org.
And now, back to the podcast. So working towards your bachelor's and eventually your master's, how did that come about for you? Were you already kind of focused on what fields you wanted to study in, what you wanted to hone in on, or was that more of a kind of evolution as you went through higher education?
It was an evolution. I was just like every other first gen, and I think that a lot of us come like that, right? Because we don't have that guidance from our parents. Some of our parents have maybe studied somewhat abroad, right, and back in their home countries, but navigating the system here is completely different than back home, right? So for my mom, it was the language barrier aspect of it, the inability to not communicate with administrators at the high school level, right? And not creating partnerships between the high school and also the parents, right? Because parents were not being invited to certain things, or documents weren't being translated in bilingual before, right? Unfortunately, in that aspect, I had to be self-reliant, which meant that I had to go to either an administrator or my counselor to ask various questions, because I was just like, I know I want to go to school, but I just don't know what I have to do to get to the next point. To be honest, I really thought high school was just going to be it, and then I had to start working. But by the blessing of God, I ended up having a very good advisor in high school, and she was such a wonderful person. She actually held my hand throughout the 4 years because she knew I was a young mother, and assisted me filling out the FAFSA, pushed me and motivated me to apply to college, inspired me to look at different ways of understanding, life after college and just college itself. Although I felt that support there, just going into college itself was a little bit nerve-wracking because there is a hidden curriculum in college that a lot of us don't know about, right? And when you get there, sometimes you feel isolated because you feel like you're years behind. And at least in my situation, I felt very underprepared while I was taking a few of the courses, that were college level courses. Because I also had to take those pre-development courses because I didn't meet the criteria for the college level. So, that kind of also put me behind towards my pace to progression as well. So it was just, overall, the journey was a little bit difficult, but it was fun because, like I said, I just learned how to navigate the ropes. And if something sparked my interest or I was leaning more towards it because either I was passionate about a topic or I received support from a professor, it would create an inkling for me to keep going. And particularly, I ended up getting my political science degree because of an inkling, because a professor was continuously telling me, hey, you're really good at political science. And we did a lot of like drafting of policies and whatnot. And he's like, you should really consider a career in politics. So that's how I ended up, pursuing political science. But yeah, it's always been an ambition of mine to run for office one day.
Wow, wonderful. So kind of at a local level or more state or national?
I think I'm looking more at a state at this point. I've actually been a fellow as well with Ignite Change. So that was about a year or 2 years ago that I did that Ignite Change program. It's a wonderful program that helps and empowers women to run for office.
Wonderful. I think we need powerful advocates like you to continue advocating for education and for TRIO programs as well. So you served in higher education for many years. What are some things you learned about higher education?
Yeah, so higher education can be a tricky world to navigate in. But one of the things that I have noticed a lot is the rising of Hispanic serving institutions, right? And the seal of excelencia. And I think one of the things that I've learned a lot is that we are Hispanic serving enrolling institutions, but we're yet to meet the serving part. There are, a few institutions that are currently serving. But I feel like there's more to be done, right? Because
Absolutely.
when you have research or you have focus groups coming specifically from students, sometimes students can see through what's really going on behind the scenes. And that is difficult to deal with, especially when you see people coming from the same background that you are, right? And those are your community. It's very difficult when you have to follow certain guidelines and rules, right? Because we want to make sure that we're going above and beyond for our students. And I think that's what I've been passionate mostly about is like, for me, it's my student. If that is my advice, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that that individual is being served correctly and that we're addressing the issues or concerns that are being brought up. But again, two things that I've learned has been how do we get to that point in becoming Hispanic serving? And I think it has to do a lot of getting collaborative input, not only from the students, but also making sure that we're communicating with the parents, right? And one of the things that some tend to forget as institutions is inviting the community and the parents to come and talk to us as administrators and tell them, this is an environment that is welcoming not only for your kid, but also for yourselves. Because part of what we have to do is making sure that we're creating those bonds and those partnerships with our communities, because they are the local neighborhoods or the surrounding individuals that are in our neighborhoods, right? So we need to make sure that we are understanding that we are getting revenue from these individuals that are paying their taxes. And we need to do a better job of understanding how can we bring the community together to help us become better Hispanic serving institutions to meet the needs of every population, because each neighborhood is diverse in its own entity. And we need to make sure that we're also being, vocal about those situations.
Absolutely. So you are a TRIO advocate. What programs have you worked with before, or collaborated or partnered with?
Yeah, so I've actually worked with the Trio Student Support Services program, and I actually love doing that because they were specifically targeting students that were interested in becoming teachers. And we used to collaborate with the program called Grow Your Own for individuals that were interested in heading down that pathway. And I think that what I really liked about just the program itself is that it specifically focuses on helping underserved communities or students that are, again, first generation, and they also help individuals with disabilities. So again, the program's main objectives is not only making sure that they're serving these students, but that they're providing academic support, personal development, which I think that we see a lot of support that might need. Maybe it would be leadership skills, time management, right? Just making sure that we're building up their confidence and their self-esteem. I think it's one of the biggest things that I love about this program. And two other things that I've actually noticed, specifically working at Northeastern as a TRIO advisor, was the financial literacy aspect of it. I feel like not a lot of students actually go to those events, and financial literacy is very, especially now that we have to pay up our student loans, right? A lot of us don't think about it, but we
now that they've started,
we have to make a budget to make sure that we're digging into our pockets and finding different avenues of paying for that student loan that we got out, right?
Absolutely.
And also, one of the biggest things that I always tell students is, if you can potentially save some money for a down payment to your first home, why not save the money now that you're young rather than when you get older and have kids? Because now you're thinking about not just yourself, but you're also thinking about the familia that you have home.
It's much harder. Yes. Oh my gosh.
So I'm always thinking about ways of how we can support our youth to actually become homeowners, because that is something that you can leave behind for your family once you're not here on earth. And I think that's also a way to establish your own legacy, right?
Yeah.
So I also tell students, look into different ways into how you can, create your own path to home ownership, or even look at the incentives that the state is offering to provide that home ownership pathway. And then lastly, career guidance. I'm always about careers, because I feel that a lot of us that are first gen, we tend to get underpaid, and we also don't know sometimes what to do with our degrees. And what I've noticed a lot is that a lot of our students tend to go for those degrees that are not specifically, geared towards accounting or towards business management, but sometimes they're in the liberal arts field, which is much harder for students to understand that although it's a liberal arts degree, what you learn and, the soft skills and those hard skills that you're learning in school, they can be applicable to any field.
Absolutely.
So just making sure that supporting those in those students to help them explore their career options, build up their resumes, and prepare them for job interviews. So I think that is where I feel TRIO does that extra academic wraparound support services, and which is why I'm always an advocate for TRIO, because they don't also help you, financially, but they're helping you holistically with a few, support items that they could assist you with.
Kind of sidebar, were you ever a participant of the TRIO programs?
I was never.
Okay.
I wasn't lucky enough to actually delve into TRIO, or I believe I also didn't qualify because I was already married. So that was another reason why I didn't join TRIO. But I have known about TRIO because when my kid entered school, that was one of the things that they also had, which was, I believe it was called the Upward Bound program.
Yes, Upward Bound.
And that's why I'm a very huge that's why I'm a very huge advocate for TRIO, because it also motivates the individual to go get it, right?
Absolutely.
Like, go get education. You could do it. We're rooting for you. And they partner them up with mentors that are older than them. And that to me is fabulous. I wish I would have had like a mentor that would be like during my high school, supporting me, holding my hand, taking me to workshops or these cultural events. I'm like, damn, I wish I had that. So it was
I
so
mean, but
sweet.
now, yeah, but now you get to mentor those students, right? You're an advisor, you're a person reaching out, you're creating these wonderful programs, wonderful organizations that guide our young leaders. So you're already doing that work that Trio has always intended to do since the mid 1960s.
Yes, yes, yes.
So can you talk to us a little bit about your experience in Trio and kind of your favorite memories of working with Trio, and then tell us, why is Trio important in higher education?
Yeah, so like I said, the reason why TRIO is important in higher education is because, as you heard, affirmative action was struck down,
Oh,
right?
that's right. Yeah.
And they said that it was because of what was happening in those elite institutions like Harvard and whatnot, that it was being discriminatory against, certain students.
Mhm.
However, it's a controversial issue, but one of the things that I'm scared of is that it only creates a pathway to students that are considered legacy students.
Mm.
That's my
That's
biggest concern, right? Because then
right.
that individuals like my son, or if I decide to go back to school and get like another, degree, it's going to be harder for me to compete with those legacy students.
Hmm.
So to me, striking that down is like, you don't want us in these elite schools. You don't want us to succeed. You don't want us seeing, partaking and being part of your community. That is what I saw when that was struck down.
Hmm.
I felt that they were telling me, tú no perteneces aquí. This is not a
Mm.
place for you.
Hmm.
And we've seen that a lot as well, with two professors, right, that have been kicked. Specifically, I'm talking about, I'm sorry, I just forgot her name, but she was in DePaul University. She was
Oh,
of,
I think I know who you're talking about.
oh, I just completely forgot
I'm
her name.
blanking too.
Oh, she wrote the book, I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. So, I was just appalled that they didn't renew her contract. And I was like, you see, this is the reason why higher education also needs to be dabbling in policy,
Hmm.
because administrators like you and I, we know the hurdles of being in, elite schools, but also what it takes for us to get there. Like I said before, our process is not linear. We go through a lot of obstacles and a lot of milestones to get where we're at. And I feel like when they gave that announcement, right, that these things were going to go away, I was like, wow, like, it's making our life twice as hard already, or maybe even more, but we're just not seeing how that's affecting us yet. All right,
Hmm.
because we have now the HSIs, like I was telling you about, those Hispanic serving institutions, which is great. But what if we want to go like to a school like Loyola?
Right.
What if we do? What if we want to go to Harvard? What if
Right.
I want to go to Princeton? Then
Hmm.
what does that exactly mean to someone like me, or to someone like my son 10 years from now?
Exactly.
What would those statistics look like? What would the
Hmm.
data come back and say, right?
Hmm.
And I think that that's where I feel that TRIO is a great advocate for diversity, right? Because they support the individual, but also the holistically looking at everyone around who's serving there, right? So not just only the student, but the community, the parents. They get the parents involved as soon as they recruit, right? Sometimes we can't recruit with the student because the student doesn't want to hear about TRIO,
Right.
or so, they tend to be like, no, I want the swag, or I want the food, right? And like parents, they're the ones sometimes more involved in the kids. So they're like, oh, you offer scholarships? Yeah, mama, ven, vamos a hablar. We can talk right now. Come on. Who's your son? Oh, Mijares, come here. We'll talk.
Absolutely.
And that's what we do. As
Yeah,
TRIO,
yeah,
we're like, come here. We'll
yeah.
talk. What do you want to major in? What do you want to do? And, we always talk to parents about their finances, right? How are you planning to pay? Is there an obstacle with paying education? What can we do
Mhm.
to better support you? And I think coming up with those plans and having TRIO as that guiding tool to help you throughout your 4-year degree, right? That is just essential.
Absolutely.
I think I might
So,
have something else that you said, but
Not at
just
all. Yeah, I think you covered the great groundwork. I'm going to just very quickly throw out Erica Sanchez. Is that the author?
yes, there we go. Erica
Yes.
Sanchez. Yes.
I was looking it up as you were talking. I was like, I got to look it up now. Definitely going to check out the book too. So, um, yeah, you talked about obstacles, one being financial barriers for a lot of families to access college. What other obstacles have you observed or experienced in higher education that might affect first generation students in limited income backgrounds or students with disabilities?
Yeah, I think that one of my biggest things that I have a near and dear passion for is students with disabilities. I had an oldest brother that passed away, and
I'm sorry.
he was disabled. And that's why I'm a huge ally for individuals that, need these, you know, extra support, whether it be because they have some sort of ism, right? What we call ableism or whatnot. But to be honest with you, I feel that there's more to be done to serve that community. And one of the biggest things that I see a lot with our Latino community sometimes, it's that when you get to college, you know that in high school you had an IEP, but sometimes navigating and knowing now that you're an adult, that you're transitioning over to college, you don't really know what to do to get the support there. And I think one of the biggest things that I've seen is that students sometimes tend to think that, okay, the IEP is just going to solely come back to college with me and it's automatically going to be
Right, it's automatic. It'll be applied. Yeah, I got that a lot. A lot of students think that it's the thing that follows you will eventually follow you to college too, and it'll be applicable to everything.
And I think that's so disheartening because sometimes they get to their second or third year and then they see that whatever disability they might have, it could be a learning disability or whatnot, it's impeding them from being successful in college. And sometimes that's why they tend to drop out, is because they didn't know that they could transfer that over. And after a certain time, right, if you're not submitting that documentation, it's no longer active. So then the school sometimes requires you to go get, tested, retested.
Yeah,
And then that is a difficult process itself. One, it takes time. Two, it might take money, right? And if you don't have health
it does.
insurance,
Yeah,
you're going to find that service to get tested. So, like, I feel that there's a lot that we need to do in that spectrum because a lot of the times students and parents are not well informed as to what to do with those IEP situations. And the reason I'm also a vocal advocate for that is because my oldest son has an IEP. Back when he was in high school, he had a learning disability, and I helped him navigate so that he could submit it on a recurring basis because you have to resubmit it every semester. So
you do.
that's
Yeah,
thing. Students think that it's just like you submit it one time, you're all set. It's not that easy. You have
no,
to resubmit
never.
every semester. So you have to remind them. It's almost like having a checklist of what things you need to do when you start the beginning of the semester. And that's one of them, making sure that you remind the student to submit that, IEP, because otherwise they won't be served. And if they don't have the proper documentation, is having to give them the tools to get tested. And I know that when I was working at Loyola, there was a center that Loyola would work with collaboratively to actually help support students that wanted to get tested. And there's also one with UIC that I believe it's also another center that helps with the testing. I'm not sure how much the charge is, but I know that there is a center there. I think the difficult part is paying, right, to get tested. And I think there maybe should be a restructuring of how TRIO can implement its legislation, or at least its policy, if we could support those students that need to get tested, right, so that we can help them academically.
Jennifer, I 100% agree with you. I feel like if more programs like TRIO were empowered to help cover the cost of a diagnosis for students who may have a learning disability, that would only empower the student, right, to continue accessing those services and to be more effective advocate for themselves. So it's really a win-win. I'm not sure why the federal government wouldn't want to promote that in TRIO programs.
Yeah, I think that is a very useful way of putting it, but also, like doing more from government. I think that sometimes government feels like, oh, like $100 doesn't make or break someone. No, it does.
Yeah,
especially in
certainly.
underserved communities. You have to choose between paying your light or paying your rent. You have to choose between buying the groceries or
Oh my
making
God.
sure that you get school uniform. And I remember that
Mhm.
because I actually lived in America and was poor. I mean, poor, poor. So that's why when I'm telling you that I support programs like Trio, it's because I've gone through the nitty gritty of what people wouldn't have imagined in their lives. And I could understand that. I could understand students that come from an underserved background, that come here as young immigrants, or whether they're born here and come from an immigrant parent household, right? Because those are all kind of very intricate and delicate situations that you kind of have to learn to maneuver as you get into college as well, right? Because it
Absolutely.
gets a little bit tricky when you fill out that FAFSA as well.
It does. A nice kind of transition to this next question, because you serve as a board member for the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement. How did this nonprofit begin, and what does it do?
Yeah, so I am part of the associate board for the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement. And this organization was created back in 1982. And they're basically subject matter experts for corporations that are seeking to access a diverse talent pipeline. And specifically for our associate board, our specific mission statement is to build a community among emerging leaders that champion aspirations and nurture strong personal and professional connections that fuel active community engagement, foster leadership development, and promote the overall mission of ASE. So specifically, our group helps individuals that are emerging leaders network, find jobs. We also hold regularly monthly meetings, and our goal is usually to help support the ASE's overall mission of providing scholarships to both undergraduate and graduate students. And we have had success doing that. Last year, we actually fundraised and actually had a 20,000 total revenue gain from our what we called our flagship gala. And we had a very successful event. We had a lot of people join. We had corporate sponsors that were part of that event as well. And I just feel that it's an amazing organization to get involved with. You don't necessarily have to join the board, but if that is one of the goals, I feel like it would be wonderful for the youth to start thinking about joining boards, because what I feel is that it prepares you not only mentally, but in a leadership capacity, because you're being in charge of responsibilities that you would have never imagined. And I think it also lets you voice your opinions and, spotlight you on things that you've been doing behind the scenes that probably people don't know about you. And the other thing is that they work with the Latino community. And I think that is very important. Sometimes we don't see reflections of ourselves in the career world, because sometimes you see only corporate board members that are all white, right? Or you see leadership just being all white or all male dominated. And I think that us does a very good job to highlight a lot of the individuals that are Latinos poderosos who are out there promoting diversity within the workplace. And I think that is something that we do very well, whether that be our summit that we do each year or our career networking events that we do virtually. They're great. And I always feel like you should get more involved. Doesn't necessarily have to be with ASE, but with other nonprofit organizations, and join those boards that align to what they have as far as their values and, whatever mission or vision they see for themselves individually.
Talking about other organizations, you also serve as a board member for Code Your Dreams and United Latinas Incorporated. What are these organizations all about, and what is your role within these organizations?
Yeah, so with Code Your Dreams, I'm actually a board of directors. So I help with anything to sponsor events, or whether that be finding sponsors for the events. We also have regularly quarterly meetings where we just discuss are following your strategy of what we're going to be doing, events that we're going to be hosting, how are we going to get volunteers to help support our initiatives, and also allocate funding. And that is a huge part of what we do, right? Fundraise to make sure that our organization keeps living and supporting individuals from these communities. As far as the United Latinas, I am only a general member there, but what I love about them is that they spotlight you, they help you with public speaking skills, they actually coach you and have groups of individual women that are, very powerful Latinas that are, already keynote speakers that have been speakers for years or that are in the midst of emerging and trying to help other novices join the speaking engagement gigs. It's just a wonderful support and a wonderful community to know that you belong to a group of individuals that want you to see you be successful. And I think that's the goal, right? Making sure that underserved communities are being successful. And I think that's what I love about ACE. What I love about Code Your Dreams and about United Latinas is that they're all here to support you and uplift you. And I think we don't do enough of that. That's why sometimes in higher education, most of our students feel like they don't belong or that the word belongingness is not there, right? Because they just feel like they're not aligning with the institution or the body of students that they're that's there within that environment. And just making sure that we have those kinds of programs, whether you seek them within the institution or outside the institution. I tell students, don't limit yourself. I actually learned about ACE through my undergraduate degree at Northeastern Illinois University.
No way. Okay.
Yes, that's how I learned about them. I wasn't very influenced about learning more about them during that age, but I was just like, oh, this is interesting. This is like a nice event. But then as I started working as an administrator in college, I was like, oh, wow, I think maybe I should do more and get my hands, more hands-on approach and start working with them to see what they're all about.
Yeah.
And I actually found it very fascinating. One of the biggest things that actually led me to become part of the associate board was that they used to have chapters within different colleges where the students were actually the leaders, and then they had subcommittees to help them initiate events. That they would host DEI initiatives within campus. Fortunately, that was dismantled about a year or 2 years ago. But that was the reason that I joined, is because the empowerment and the tools that you're giving the students to become advocate leaders of not only us as a nonprofit, but also for themselves to be publicly seen and heard at an institution that, as we all know, higher ed wasn't built for people of color. It was built for white individuals, specifically males, right? So to make sure that we're being diverse in an all-white male-dominated area, to me, lo máximo. Because we do more to be present and to show that we're there for a reason, right? That we're there because we are meant to be there, because we have that seat at the table, and we want you to know que aquí estamos and we're not going to go anywhere.
Absolutely. And I love that so far you've been answering questions that segue beautifully into the next one. What are some trends in higher education that you're excited about?
Yeah, so some trends, like I said, was the Seal of Excelencia. That is very interesting to me, how the Seal of Excelencia goes into and does data and focus groups and, gets to learn more about programs and also higher education institutions. And I feel that's where you gather all your data of whether an institution is going to be an emerging Hispanic serving institution, if it's going to be soon recognized as an HSI or whatnot. And just having that seal, it's like, let's put it like that. When you get straight A's, you get like a nice certificate that says like, oh, you're a straight honor roll student.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So the same is with becoming an HSI and then getting the Seal of Excelencia, right? You're like, hey, we have that certificate to tell me now we did it.
Right.
I think what I like about that is that it actually the data is not biased. They actually talk to the students and they talk to the administrators to see what they're doing differently, that it's making their institution be more of a serving rather than enrolling institution. And that's what I like, because my doctoral dissertation is also on Hispanic serving institutions. And actually, I am so intrigued about the emerging institutions. Specifically, when I look at emerging institutions, what I really think about is whether they want to be recognized as HSIs, and that's why they haven't reached the HSI designation, or if it's because they want to remain status quo as being just primarily white enrolling, right? And that's where my wheels start turning, right? Because then I'm like, oh, so you are enrolling Latinos, but you just maybe don't want to get there because, I feel sometimes in higher education, there is a lot of, unfortunately, biases that people hold towards individuals of color. And with that being said, how do we dismantle those structures, or how do we make sure that people like us, right, are being adequately served? And I think that's where I start thinking about these questions, right? Like, what can we do to support and better serve our students, but also what can we do with institutions, and ask them those questions. Why are you still an emerging HSI and not gotten the designation yet? Is it because you're not recruiting enough for those students, or are you just saying that there's not enough students to become an HSI? So those are the questions that I kind of think about when I see those reports, is because I really would love to know sometimes what's happening behind the scenes when they have those leadership meetings. Like, are you really, being honest and transparent about how you're recruiting your students? And I think that is one of the intricacies that I've seen a lot in higher education.
What are some challenges or trends, challenging trends that you've seen that are affecting higher education? I know for a lot of colleges, it's artificial intelligence and what it can do. What are you observing?
Yeah, so like you said, ChatGPT has become the discussion.
Yes, it has. For better or worse.
But one of the things that I have noticed is ChatGPT itself is not bad, right? What I feel is like the way you use it and might implement it. That's where I see it might be an issue, right? But I think that it does an overall good job of teaching individuals a starting point, right? So for example, let's break it down. If we're teaching a English 101 class, right? And we're telling a student to write an argumentative paper on Republicans versus Democrats, right? And maybe the individual doesn't know anything about that topic, right? Using ChatGPT as a starting foundation to ask it, what do they know about this specific topic? I think it's a good example of how ChatGPT helps support just the data and the information that it brings. I'm not saying copy word for word and absolutely turn into paper like that. No, but it is a good starting foundation for individuals that might have issues understanding a concept to kind of look and do the research and then go back, to actual resources that are reliable that you can back up your paper with, right? And I think that that's sometimes difficult mindset with professors that have been teaching for many years and have done it the old school way, where it's like, no, you got to get the book, or you got to go on the internet, and sometimes specifically our students, right? They don't have a lot of time to go to the library or to go pick up, 10 journal articles right now. At least it gives them a starting point, and it allows them to get a bigger idea of what they could do and how to develop the paper and how to structure it. And I think for me, ChatGPT is a blessing, because sometimes, the assignments that you get can be rigorous and you might have no absolute idea of how to do it, or you might not have the time to even go for a one-on-one tutoring, right?
Right.
Typically, if you're working or if you're a mother or a parent or whatnot, it becomes difficult and burdensome to tell a student, oh, well, you have tutoring, but tutoring closes at 7 p.m. And maybe that's the time that you have to go into work.
Mm-hmm.
So it just gives the student that flexibility and that option. And I think to me, yeah, it could be controversial because of plagiarism and it not being your creative thought. But just like everything else, not everything comes creatively from the minds of ourselves, right? We look at other data, at other research, and see where the missing gaps are. So I feel like ChatGPT just does that, right? Helps you find those gaps in the data that you might need.
Absolutely. Jennifer, what is the most passionate thing about your work? Like, what do you find in your work that you feel really passionate about?
I think I find passion in helping young women develop. And I think that for me as a young woman who was a young mother, it was very hard. There was times that I would go to bed and just cry because I didn't have the same experience as my peers, right? So my peers, after classes, they would be able to hang out and go grab a coffee or go do a movie, where I had to go home, run after class, and just pick up my child and, take care of his needs.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I still see it in higher ed today, where a lot of colleges that used to have daycare opportunities for our students are dismantling the daycare options. And unfortunately, that is a setback for individuals like myself or those individuals that are coming after me, right? Is that we need that support. We need daycare centers to help us. How do you expect me to go to class if I have my baby? How do you expect me to be successful if you're not even aligning to my needs? And I think that's something that we need to address as well, is because I know that there have been a few institutions that have cut daycares completely from their campuses. And I'm like, why? Some people say, oh, it's because they're not using it. But I'm wondering, have you asked them why haven't they used that service? Is there something that we can change as an institution ourselves to help address the problem? I think just because you don't see someone using a service doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need it. It just necessarily means that maybe there's something there that we're not attending to and that needs to be better addressed. So I think that's one of the issues that I've seen a lot, especially students that are going into a doctoral program. A rigorous doctoral program comes with many headaches and with a huge heart to finish it, right? Because I feel like I have passion for education. So I'm about to wrap up my doctoral degree, but it's no easy feat. To be honest with you, I've experienced it all. I've cried. My husband has seen me crying. He's like, why are you crying? I'm like, because I don't get it. I don't know how to do that. And I just break down. And I'm like, and then there's sometimes where I complain to my cohort and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to drop out. I can't handle it. I don't understand anything. And then, I've gotten wonderful individuals within my cohort that have, supported me and, uplift me to stay in the program, to keep pursuing it because we're this close to being done. And I think that a lot of us is because it's the stress. Being a parent is difficult, right? There is no handbook on how to, raise.
Unfortunately.
There's no handbook on like disciplining them, or I mean maybe disciplining, but it's just a difficult task itself. And we live in a new modern age era where things are not just like they used to be before. And I think that has been overall, quite how can I say it, has been quite challenging, to be honest, right? Because things are just basically different.
Absolutely. Higher education, as again, you're doing a wonderful job answering these questions that segue to the next one that really connect. Higher education is facing its own set of challenges. And you and I sitting here together, I feel like we're really big advocates for higher education, but we can't ignore that there are higher costs for higher education, that many are questioning whether it's worth getting a degree, and whether we can spend all day on a podcast talking about how not only valuable but worthwhile getting that degree is. But what is your take on all this? With many saying, is it even worth getting this degree? The higher cost of higher education. Do you want to even pursue this? What's your take?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that higher education is worth it. Whether you're getting a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, a doctoral degree, a master's, I don't care what you get educated.
Absolutely.
My oldest son told me, Ma, I'm not going to go to a 4-year degree. I'm not going to seek it. I don't like school. School is not meant for me. I kind of struggled with that. I was like, what? No, you did not.
So you must have struggled. Okay, you and I can relate to this because my son immediately after high school, he said, "I'm not going to college." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, what's going on? Like, why are you not going to college?" He's like, "I'm going to take a year break. I'm going to assess to see if I want to do it." Luckily, he's going to film school. He's going to do something eventually. But yeah, no, I was right there in the same boat you were. I'm like, "What? What do you mean you're not going to college?" Like right after, but after some conversations, it's been like, oh, "Okay, I understand."
My computer is running low, so let me just charge, okay?
No, yeah. Take a second. I'm also gonna get a very quick drink of water.
Okay.
And Jennifer, you've been doing a wonderful job doing. I'll edit this all on post production, but you've been wonderful. You've been answering these questions wonderfully, and yeah, so I'm glad that you were able to do this one-on-one. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes. So like I said, my kid told me that and I was like, ¿Qué cosa? You what? You just decided you made that decision not to go and pursue a 4-year degree? I was like,
Right.
no. I was like, no. Like seriously, I was
We're like, no.
I was like, no. I was like, you're gonna go to 4-year, and he's like, no, mama. And we kind of, at first, I was just like very heartbroken and disappointed. Not at him, but I thought I was disappointed in myself because I was like, maybe I didn't do a good enough job showing him how much I love education, or maybe I just didn't have the words to tell him, like, no, education is like awesome and whatnot. But I think what he has realized is that not everyone is built for their education, and I get it. I understand. I've always been a bookworm. So for me, education just comes naturally. Even to the point where at this point in my life, I'm like, even if I get a doctoral degree, I may still go back and just get some extra credentials on some other aspect of life that I know something will come up because I'm very creative and I always love and enjoy learning. But with my son, what I've seen a lot is that his generation, if they don't see a need for them to go to a 4-year or go get a master's, they won't do it. And it's not that they're not happy about getting educated. It's just that sometimes they understand that within associates, sometimes they could just get into a 6-figure job, and that just comes easily for them. And I'm glad that they're thinking about workforce development because that is something that I didn't think about when I got my associates, my bachelor's, etc. I was just thinking about getting my next degree because I wanted to show people like, hey, I did this thing and I'm educated. But what is education if you don't have, the salary to show for it? And I think that's what we struggle, right? Showing what we've done for it. And for him, his realization was when he had a conversation with a police state trooper, and the trooper told him, okay, these are the incentives, these are the cons. And then he spoke to a few people in the, that are part of the, justice system, right? Whether that be a police officer, whether that be a judge, he was looking at his options.
Right.
And what he gathered from it is like, hey, if I'm just going to be doing this specifically, which is an ISP, which is an Illinois State Trooper, then I'm just going to go get my associate's degree. There is no reason for me to go back to school and get a 4-year degree. I think it also depends on the situation of the individual, right? If the individual can, find a good 6-figure job with a 2-year degree, I mean, God bless them, right? Because as time progresses, they'll be able to increase wages, right? Depending if they get, some type of increase, bonuses, it just all depends. But to be honest with you, I wouldn't recommend just saying to everyone get a 4-year degree or get a master's degree. I don't think it's a one size fits all. It's very catered and very independent to the student and to the life situations and circumstances that happen, right? So for me, I was dealing with a lot because I feel like I do a lot because I've always done a lot since I was a little girl. At the age of 5 or 6 years old, I was already translating, negotiating. I was taking care of my younger brother. So for me, balancing all that keeps me busy and motivated. Whereas if I see myself relaxing, I feel like I'm not doing enough, or at least I'm not being active as much. So what I would tell students that are, that are considering going into college, yes, get an associate's degree. An associate's degree is valuable. If that's where you see yourself stopping, okay, that's fine. No one's going to judge you for that.
Right.
But if a 4-year degree is something that you're interested in, go for it. Because the 4-year degree also pivots you and allows you to enter certain spaces in the workforce. And a lot of the recruiters, they are looking for bachelor's degree students. Some of them do look for 2-year degrees, but that's just, certain fields, right? So like IT certifications and associates, that's good for them. What else? Anything that has to do with criminal justice, a 2-year degree is fine. But for most Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, they're looking for a bachelor's degree, and that makes or breaks whether you're going to get that interview. And that is something to consider and take into account, right? Because what I've seen a lot when we do recruitment events, the first thing they ask is, do you have a bachelor's degree? And if you click no on that application, you're automatically disqualified. Your application is not even going to be looked at.
Wow.
So, those are just some of the things to remember. I mean, I feel that when students have to take that leap of faith and, decide, should I get a 2-year or a 4-year? You have to sit down and think about what you want to do in the moment that you're in, right? Because it also depends on what circumstances you're encountering at this point in your life that are going to let you, always decide and make the final decision. For me, it was just easier to take one associate's, then my bachelor's, then my master's, because unfortunately for me, like I said, I'm a lifelong learner. So for me, it's always like, is it a good time for me to get a bachelor's? Do I need a bachelor's to get an increase or to get my next level up in my job or my career, right? So that's what I always think about when I think about getting a certain degree. What can I do with this degree? And how can I level that to get into the next position that I imagine myself being in? And I think that's what students need to do. Imagine yourself where you want to be, and then consider the pros and cons of like, okay, would a recruiter be looking at a 2 or a 4-year degree? And I think even doing a simple search with a recruiter, just asking them for the positions that are in, for example, let's say one of the biggest ones that I've seen is data analytics. For data analytics, do I need a 2 or a 4-year degree? Just ask those questions. They're never going to say no.
Right.
And once you have that information, use it to make your decision, right? And if unfortunately life circumstances are not going to allow you to do a 4-year degree, then do a 2-year degree. And then when you can, get a job, do the employer tuition reimbursement, and then leverage that to get your 4-year degree. Because one of the other things that I've seen a lot, students don't know about tuition reimbursement from your employer.
Yeah.
Leverage that. You can get out of like paying. I mean, you still have to pay out of pocket, but you won't need to use student loans to do that, right? So now your employer's reimbursing you for what you're investing in your education. And I think that's one of the things to consider as well.
Absolutely. So earlier in the podcast, you were talking about also having a real estate license. That also has a level of entrepreneurship skills that you need, right?
So I don't have a real estate license. I did have a leasing license. It's inactive.
Leasing license. Sorry. Yes.
But I am a real estate investor. And what that exactly
Ooh.
means is that I just do home hacking. So I buy properties, I either flip them or I use them as passive income. And yes, you do need a certain level of skill sets. And like I said before, my first job was doing a lot of that, real estate postings, a lot of like the rental income. I would receive it and I would manage that and provide and give it back to my supervisor. So I did a lot of the management aspect of it and also hiring the contractors that would go to those buildings. So I did learn a lot from that experience. And just when I started going to school, one of the things that I realized was that networking and cultivating relationships was the way to go.
Wow.
And that's how I ended up knowing a loan mortgage originator. What did they do? And, talking to potential people that would like to partner up with me and, create a real estate investment opportunity for, this partnership opportunity and whatnot. And then I've also learned about communities within the real estate investment that allow you to flourish and ask them questions, whether it's, it could be like a question like, where do I get the rental agreement from? And where do I get, a property management company from? Or who would you recommend for that? A lot of it has been through networking. And this is why I'm a big proponent of networking and joining events and nonprofit organizations as board members, because you do a lot of that there and you learn how to connect and you learn about other people's interests. And that's how you can gather a partner, gather funding, etc. And it's a wonderful way to connect and meet individuals that might have the same interests as you do.
Wonderful. How has Trio influenced your work?
Yeah, so Trio has influenced a lot of my work. What I've realized is that it has influenced it because I actually wanted to open up a nonprofit and apply for the Trio funding that there is, right? So there is 4 ways.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
But I did have a business mentor, and they're a company called SCORE. It's a nonprofit organization that helps you develop your business, whether it be a for-profit or a nonprofit. It was advised to us that it is a difficult task to get those grants because usually those grants are only given to higher education institutions. And there are some minor nonprofit organizations that have been granted the opportunity to work with those grants. So it was a competitive, decision. So my partner and I decided not to move forward with it. However, that only made me cater and pivot because I'll be soon opening up a nonprofit that will help women entrepreneurs and young college students that are interested in pivoting to entrepreneurship and using their skill sets to get professional development opportunities with us, and also take advantage of those networking sessions, because a lot of it has to do, like I said, with networking, and networking opens up the doors to a lot of individuals. And I've been blessed enough to sponsor events and also to create events through the organizations that I belong to. And I have found a magnificent group of individuals that have been able to support me, spotlight me, and have been working together with me to collaboratively create these nonprofit opportunities. And like I said, I am just so happy that I'll be launching this new nonprofit soon, by the end of the month or next month.
Wow.
But we're having our inaugural event October 21st. And I'll post more details about it on my LinkedIn, but we are going to have our first inaugural meeting October 21st for all those young women entrepreneurs that are considering getting into the entrepreneurship world. And we're going to have a huge panel discussion with people that have gone through that pathway and what their words of advice are.
We'll definitely post that on the podcast webpage and also on the social medias. That way, because the episode might not air in time, I want to make sure that that information you're sharing with us, if you could forward that to me, I'd greatly appreciate it.
Yes.
Wonderful. So you've worked in higher education in many roles and many positions. What was memorable about each position? What have you learned, or what do you feel like you took away from that?
Yeah, so what I've taken away from just working at various higher education institutions is that there's a lot that we could always do. We always have to change, and we have to change with the needs and the time that we're serving our students, right?
Absolutely.
So I feel that throughout the past few years, we've gone through many things. We've gone through a pandemic. We've pivoted remotely. Um, we've been unsteady about the financial outcomes of what's happening, right? We thought we were going to have government shutdown. Then we're kind of going into, even if they don't want to call it a recession, damn, this is a recession, right?
Right. It feels like it. Yeah.
And the last thing I read about home ownership is that the interest rate is too high and people don't want to take out a loan with a high interest rate. Um, and then just it's getting harder for first gen as well to buy their first home because the loans now are piling up, and this with this massive increase in interest, that is not creating an opportunity for individuals to earn their first home or put anything into savings.
Right.
So I think that a lot of what I've learned is that we need to do better in working together with our partners within the community. I've learned that we need to do a lot of stakeholder engagement within our institution or outside of an institution, and make sure that we're actually receptive to the feedback that we get. I feel sometimes when we go into these meetings, we go with a preconceived idea of what we want to do and where we want to get to. But sometimes the reality of things is we have to pivot. We have to, because these are hard times. And just to be clear, I feel that 4 years, 5 years down the line, we don't know how far the increases are going to get as far as the current living wages, right? Just everything is more expensive now. And how is that going to be reflected for those graduates that are entering the workforce at this point? But also, how is that affecting them in their daily life to create generational wealth for them and their families? And I think that's where we need to help support and initiate more opportunities where we talk about boardrooms, where we talk about networking, where we talk about social capital. And I think these are things that we need to be discussing. And I think the only institution that I've seen done this a lot has been Dominican University, where their Brennan Business School of Education has done a lot to have students think about their financial wealth. And I got to give them kudos to that because not a lot of higher education institutions are teaching their students about like how to manage your budget, what to do with this. Now, I've been a success coach at Loyola University, and one time I did have a student to come and ask me like, how do I budget? I don't know how to budget.
Oh my gosh.
Help me budget.
Yeah. Just like bare bones budget, right? Like help me get my finances in order.
And it was very interesting to me because as success coaches, we don't necessarily help in that aspect, but because I do have familiarity with that, I decided to help the student. I was like, you know what? We're just going to have to create a budget for you right now. Because they were struggling. They were eating out so much that they were struggling to actually,
oh my goodness,
to actually ride on public transportation or take an Uber, or, like the daily necessities that they would need. They couldn't do it because they were spending so much on that takeout rather than spending it adequately or proficiently on certain days during certain times. So we were able to work with them adequately. But again, I think that as institutions, we need to know where our students are lacking knowledge and where we can fill those gaps with knowledge so that we can better serve them. Because I think if we're just educating, right, the basic knowledge of like expanding our learning and, whatnot, we need to do more than that. We need to make sure that they're prepared for the actual life, right? And when I'm saying actual life is, yes, budgeting is a big part, and as a big adult, you're going to have to learn how to do it, papito, mamita. There's no...
Jennifer, call it out. Yes, absolutely.
There's like, ¿quiere leche or you want those Air Force? Which ones do you want? like which one's more important to you at this time? And you have to
Prioritizing.
live with those. So, we have our needs and we have our wants, right? And we have to
Absolutely.
start thinking about those things in higher ed, because I feel like a lot of our students sometimes lack how to be truly independent. They might be living on campus, but being truly independent adults is a whole different ballgame. And I usually get a lot of those students, coming to me asking, like, how do you do it? How do you manage your time? There's just like, I am independent, but I have so much time in my hands, but I get nothing done. I'm not being productive. How do I do it? And I think having those sessions and those workshops for students as a massive initiative for higher education, I think that would be helpful to better assist their students to become, not only great at their workforce, but just professionally within their personal development. We need to make sure that these are capable human beings of living outside academia.
Absolutely. So, Jennifer, lifting Latino, Latinx, Latina identities is very important to your work. It is very evident in your career so far. There are still glaring achievement gaps in higher education for Latinx students, but for some colleges, they're making great strides in closing those gaps. You pointed to Dominican University as one of those colleges that are trying to do that. What more can be done to not only close the gap, the achievement gap, but to support Latinx students, college-bound and currently enrolled students, to support them in higher education?
Yeah, I think there's so much that we could do to support them in higher education, to be honest with you. And I think that I just spoke on a couple of those items, but I think that just higher education is closely intertwined with policy at various levels. So I think that it is imperative for administrators to stay informed about higher education policy changes and trends, because that's how certain programs or certain departments are impacted on the operation of the college and the universities, right? Because sometimes policies can promote or hinder diversity and inclusion efforts,
They can,
influence admission criteria. And, I feel like those are the things that we need to look at, right? And we really need to be very proficient at looking not only at the institution itself, but what policies are being enacted and who is the person representing us at the table that are talking to them about what is needed in actuality. Sometimes I feel these people from the Department of Education, they're always sitting, they're only receiving a report, right? So they only see paper and data. But in actuality, they're not like us, right? They're not the frontline workers working with these students every day. So I think that there is a misconception of what has been done and what is being recorded in the data, then, going in there and actually interviewing students, getting feedback, direct feedback from students. I think it is imperative that we're always looking for those policies and seeing how that changes everything, because that really does shape the way we serve our students, right? Because if we don't have the budget to serve them, then as much as we want to help them, our hands are tied, because we also, as administrators, have to follow policies and procedures, right? Because we do have supervisors. We're not the head honchos sometimes. So we got to do, what we can within the scope of our work.
Absolutely. So speaking of entrepreneurship from an earlier question, what advice do you have for those who are interested in entrepreneurship? You have listeners that may be saying, how do I even get started? What advice could you give them?
I think the advice that I would give them is, don't ever say, because I'm scared, I'm not going to do it.
I love that.
I've always been frightened when I take a step into a different sphere or to another interest that I might have, but I don't let that hold me back. I just kind of, roll with the punches. And I feel that a lot of us are scared because we have this mentality of being the perfect daughter, the perfect son. And there is no such thing. We're not perfect. No one's perfect.
Sorry to burst their bubble, everybody. There's no such thing as perfection.
I mean, let me know when you find a Mrs. or Mr. Perfect. I would love to meet him. I need some help then.
Jennifer, have you watched the show Ted Lasso?
No, I have not, but I've heard of it.
So they make a reference to perfection, and I think ultimately their main message was humans are imperfect. We're not perfect individuals, but certain like movies can be perfect, music can be perfect, just individual ourselves, we're not perfect. But just wanted to throw that out there. But go ahead. What were you
No,
saying?
no, I mean, you're right. Individuals cannot be so perfect. And I think sometimes because of Marianismo, especially in our younger Latina women, we
Mhm.
see that a lot. We try to be the perfect daughter, porque Marianismo stems from that, right? From like acting as the Virgin Mary or resembling the Virgin Mary, being the caretaker, being the one that's always doing everything. But unfortunately, there is no perfection. There can't be. Unfortunately, it would be highly stressful and just like very superficial. I feel like that you would consider someone being the perfectionist because there's no such thing. I
Right.
feel that maybe there might be a facade of it that's like a front given, but you don't know what happens behind closed doors. And I'm never a perfectionist. I'm not saying I'm the best mom, I'm the best administrator, I'm the best trio advocate. No. But what I am saying is what we need to do or what we need to look at when we're looking at entrepreneurship is making sure that we're addressing our fears by the horns. Saying,
Absolutely.
no, you're not going to take a hold of me. No, I'm going to go ahead, take a leap of faith. Y lo que Dios quiera vendrá. And it will, because I took that leap of faith with my first real estate investment. I was like, no, this is going to be terrible. All these crazy ideas would come into my head. And I, believe me or not, I would go home and I would not sleep at all because I was so freaked out that I would mess something up. And I have
Mhm.
messed things up. My house has been flooded. I had to
Oh
take
my
care of it.
gosh.
I've had a situation where the tree broke down in front of my house and landed on top of my house. So
Oh
you know,
my goodness.
things are never perfect. That's what I'm trying to say. And as an entrepreneur, you just learn you have to learn how to roll with the punches and just be prepared for the unexpected. And you know how they say, get uncomfortable with the get uncomfortable. Get comfortable with the uncomfortable. I'm sorry about that. I
I've
was
heard
thinking,
no, yeah.
and I'm like, it's true. You have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable because, unfortunately, life is just that way. You never expect something to
Yeah.
happen, but it does, right? Like I didn't expect one of my tenants to tell me, "Oh, I'm not going to renew a contract." So now I have to find out and do the leasing myself and get someone else to rent my apartment, right? So there's always things that come across, and you just have to learn how to pivot. And pivoting is very
Absolutely.
essential. And I think that a lot of us tend to forget we do that all the time since we're very young, right? Sometimes our parents have to work two jobs, and maybe you're the oldest one, and you have to like help support your parent while they're at work by maybe picking up your two younger brothers and sisters, right? So we're always pivoting, we're always helping, we're always doing something different. But just because it's entrepreneurship, and I think maybe it's the word entrepreneurship that kind of scares people off, is just being the
Scary.
concept of on your own. And it's not true. You have a village, you have una comunidad, you have a group of individuals that are here to help you. So rely on them. If you feel you're lonely or that you can't do something yourself, go to these support groups. Check out Eventbrite. There's a ton of opportunities out there to network with individuals. Or join
Mm-hmm.
certain boards so that you can feel more inspired or have that ability where you can bounce ideas off people and be like, oh, so you started your own nonprofit. Okay, what did you do when you first did this? Did you create your business plan doing X, Y, and Z? Asking those questions without being scared of taking the leap. And I think that's what I would recommend. Take the leap of faith. 2, get a mentor. And 3, if you have questions, go to online forums or go to in-person events and ask people that are already in that business and pick their brain. They'll never say no.
Yeah. Very good advice. What about advice for trio professionals that are currently working with trio students?
Yeah, so for trio professionals, I think I'm going to be blunt here, but some trio organizations in certain campuses are great, and some of them need to really work
No,
on
true. I think you got a variety, right? Like you got the really effective, really involved programs, and then there's programs that are struggling to find their identity or struggling to find how to serve their students. But no, you were saying, I'm sorry.
No. And it's just the reality of it. And I think that what we need to do as we're having to work with a diverse group of individuals is that we also need to step back sometimes and think about our unconscious bias, because I think we all come with that, whether that be you a professional or just an administrator or just a secretary. We all come with biases, and I think sometimes that kind of leaks out in ways that you unintentionally feel that are not there, but students sometimes can see through that. And I think that what we need to do as a group is just making sure that we're having meetings with our staff at least once a week and asking them, how are you doing? But not just like, we're like walking through the office and you're like, how are you doing today? And you're just like, yeah, good, fine, because we're always rushing. I think that finding about an hour to talk to your team, to kind of realign them and go through, the group's mission or values or, whatever is holding that group together, to make sure that you're doing that realignment continuously every academic semester, every quarter. Because I feel we tend to like get jaded after a few years of doing the same work. And there's no acknowledgement there. And if there's no acknowledgement of the work that you're doing, and if you feel unseen, unheard, or not even valued, I think that only hurts our students itself and the way we're working with the program and helping the students. And I think that if we do more of an interconnection with our staff, it just helps alleviate those sentiments that are there bottled up. Because sometimes I feel we tend to say, yeah, we're okay, but no, we're really not okay. Sometimes you don't know if you're dealing with a sick child at home. You don't know if a family passed away and you're just dealing with that, because right now, although you get time off for individuals that are immediate family members that have passed away, sometimes it could be your closest tia abuela, right? And you can't get off of them, right? I just feel that bereavement should be given to, it doesn't matter if they're close family or not, right? If it's someone you loved and you connected with a lot, take that time off. But I feel that sometimes policies, human resource policies and procedures sometimes get in the way. And sometimes we're humans. We carry all those emotions with us. And if we're not giving that time to our team members, to have them vent out, just like, as academic tree advisors, sometimes we're there sometimes just to listen for a venting session that the student is telling me, oh, es que doctora Margarita, una F en el papel. I don't even know how that happened. I did all the best. And then she's like, I just don't like her because she has been picking on me this whole semester. Those are venting sessions. They're telling you about their academic process, but they're also venting out because maybe they don't have someone at home that they can vent out to and complain about this grade, right? Or maybe they just want you to step in. Same goes to show for our administrators in the TRIO program. You need to make a dedicated time for them to have those venting sessions, because again, we're working, being underpaid. Sometimes we're, just having a difficult day, and maybe want to have someone to talk to, someone to listen to. And I think that is very important. I've been doing a lot of self-reflection lately because I had 4, maybe 5 consecutive years with loved ones have passed away. And I was like, man, que mala racha. Every year I have someone that I love pass away, and I don't get why. And I would question, why only me? Like, why is it only happening to me and not others? What did I do so wrong that I deserve to see a death in my closest circle every year? And I realized that, I was breaking down at work and also not being attuned to what I was doing because I wasn't being asked, how are you? How do you feel today? Team meetings are not only supposed to be transactional, they're supposed to be there to help support you emotionally, right? Because emotionally and physically, someone can be unstable on the inside right? And then we have people that completely break down and then don't come in the following week or the following day, right? Because they had enough of the job. But I think we could do better and retain our good administrators if we just give them the time of day to just hear them out. And I think that's where higher ed is lacking. And some of the TRIO staff is also having a lot of issues is in retaining their staff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we do it because we're passionate, right? So the salary might not be an issue.
Right.
But if you're not being heard and you're not being appreciated, that just only adds to the boiling, hot, steaming pot there, right?
Right.
So you just need to do your due diligence as a leader and take the time to hear them out. And if they don't want to share as a group, send them a kind email. Hey, you want to have something in your head you want to take off your shoulders today? Like, we can maybe take lunch today and have a one-on-one. Let's chat.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about how everything's going. I think that doesn't hurt to ask. And I feel that TRIO has more of a leverage to kind of do that, right? To maybe use some of the money to not only do it for their staff members, but use it as an opportunity to get to know their student body as well.
Absolutely. Excellent points. I'm going to shift gears now and ask you, what about something you would like to, or advice you would like to share with TRIO students from all over the TRIO programs like Upward Bound Talent Search, Student Support Services, McNair, and Veterans Upward Bound, and Educational Opportunity Centers?
This is so cliche, pero hazle caso a tu mamá.
I love that. That's wonderful.
It's to your parents.
Listen.
When I was recruiting, everyone was like, nope, not interested in TRIO. I was like, doña, su hijo no quiere tomar la ventaja de esta beca. Le digo, es un programa tan bueno para ellos. Le digo, they loved me. They loved me when I was so bluntly honest. I was like, are you sure like your child is not interested in getting a scholarship or being financially supported, academically motivated? And they're like, oh, you guys do all that? Yeah, we do all that. They're like, Fernando, come over here. Yeah.
Look.
We'll take care of you.
That's wonderful.
So, I mean, parents know best. Although
Yes.
sometimes we might lack the language or sometimes the knowledge to, support our students. Nowadays, I feel more parents are getting involved, specifically in our Latino community. I feel like there is a lot of push for students to go get educated. And like I said, it's not so much of them going into a 2 or 4 year, whatever they choose. Their parents are supporting them sometimes to get into these programs because they know the sacrifices that they're going to have to go through if they don't get educated. And my word of advice to them is like, do listen to them. They sacrifice so much to get you to this point in life. So why not take advantage of what's being offered? And first of all, TRIO is free. Free.
Right.
You don't have to pay anything.
Free service.
So everything that you get is a blessing for you. I mean, like I said, I wish I would have someone to support me. And if you feel that you need more than the 2 sessions or more than the 1 session that you go with your TRIO advisor, you can always ask to meet with them whenever you feel. Right?
Absolutely. Yes.
So I'm like, no te van a quitar nada. Go and take advantage of them. That's what they're there for, to help you and assist you. Even if it's just to say, oh, I had for lunch an ensalada today. I'll be like, oh yeah, what flavor? What you put on it?
I love that. Jennifer, what are some absolutely.
Like, we're all human, so there's a way that we need to connect, and sometimes we connect through food. My mom will say, una barriga llena está contenta, and I'm like, like every time we offer food, I don't know if your TRIO program have seen it, but when you say free food, the students are there.
They're there. They're like, just tell me when.
Okay, you're here already. Let's go get into the advising session right now.
Yeah. So, Jennifer, what are some books, shows, or podcasts that you're listening to? Hopefully this Let's Talk TRIO, you're listening to this one too.
Yes, besides this one, I think one of the biggest books that I've been reading right now, it's called Four Brown Girls, and the author is Prisca Dorcas Mojica Rodriguez. And I really like her detailed account of, her being an administrator, but also what she experienced in her personal life and in her academic journey. And I think I see a lot of myself reflected in her book. And I think a lot of Latinas or Latinos are also going to see a reflection of what it is to be Latino and, just navigating the academic system. And I think it's a wonderful book to read. I haven't finished it all, but I feel like it brings a lot to the table. And when we identify writers like her, I feel it also leads the way of how we're shaping our curriculum as administrators in higher education, and bringing on more of those narratives to the classroom makes the atmosphere within the classrooms, within the institutions, to be a whole different one. When sometimes, like I said, sometimes you feel like you don't belong, but that just implementing that within your curriculum can definitely change the way students see and perceive the institution itself.
Certainly. This next question I'm going to ask you, but I'm going to reframe it and restructure it because I've asked it in other episodes before, and I feel like I need to ask it here. If you could use one word to describe yourself, what would it be?
I would say I would describe myself as a multi-potentialite, which is a word I learned from a TEDx talk. And that is someone that's very good at various interests and has multiple jobs over one's lifetime. And I feel that I am that.
Awesome. So what I traditionally do is I will use the word that you describe yourself with, and I will use as the title of your podcast episode.
Okay.
What is something you learned about yourself in your professional work?
So something that I've learned about in my professional work about myself is throughout the years, I've become more stern with the decisions I make within my roles and duties. I have learned how to navigate a lot of stakeholder management, creating advisory boards or advisory councils, and using data, qualitative and quantitative, to analyze, campus culture and curriculum. I think that I've seen a lot that needs to be done. And as scholars that we are, I feel that it's only good for us to be vocal about what we see and be honest about it. Because sometimes I feel like we want to be team players, right? And when I say team players, sometimes we wouldn't just want to go with whatever's out there. And I have sometimes been accused of being very vocal. But I am vocal because I've been there. Like I said, I see it in myself a lot reflected in the students that I serve. And I'm like, I just can't let things go. We need to address this. And what can we do to push ourselves to be better? And I think one of my previous supervisors, who used to be Jake Butcher from Dominican University. I don't know if he's still there, but I remember him, and he was like, yeah, you just have that spirit. He's like, even if you don't have a ranking title, you're still out there doing your thing and making sure people hear you and see you. And I'm like, yeah, because at this point in my life, I'm like, I'm a mother of three. I have all boys. I'm like, and I have to be stern when I saying something, or like we're talking about like no means no, right? And like, you ain't doing that. And I think that I've taken that with me into my career, and that's what I've learned, that I've become more stern in my decisions and how I handle myself, and making sure that I'm voicing my opinions, because my opinions are as good as anyone else's in that table.
Absolutely. Jennifer, it has been a wonderful pleasure to have you on this podcast. I hope to have you on again soon.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we have a tradition on the Let's Talk Trio podcast where we have the guests do a sign-off. Do you care to do the honors?
Yeah. So thank you again for having me here today. This is Jennifer Franco, and I'm a speaker, social entrepreneur, multi-potentialite, a current doctoral student at Loyola University. And I would like to say, Trio works.
Are you a participant, alum, or staff of a Trio program? Do you want your program highlighted? You or your program could be featured in an upcoming episode of Let's Talk Trio. Get a hold of us by going to our Facebook page or Instagram and send us a direct message. Search for Let's Talk Trio. We want to get your story to the public.
That was our guest, Jennifer Franco. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and for sharing your trio story. Remember, if you would like to be on the Let's Talk Trio podcast or know a staff, advocate, participant, or alumni, send us an email at letstalktrio@gmail.com. That email again is letstalktrio@gmail.com. A huge thanks to our sponsors, Angelica Villalpando, Rosario Riley, Angelica Valdez, Felicia Rivera, Dr. Jamie Motley, Dr. Ryan Barone, TrioJoblist.com, Nosotros Education Center, Jaded Electronics, The Trio Store, powered by Proforma. Visit www.thetriostore.com, your source for Trio graduation stoles. And Student Access. Thank you all so much for your continued support of this podcast. You too can sponsor the Let's Talk Trio podcast in one of three ways. Become a monthly patron on Patreon. Our base level starts at $1 a month. Become a corporate sponsor by placing an ad on the podcast. Email us for details. Become a supporter with a one-time donation to the podcast PayPal account. Our handle is @Let'sTalkTrio. One more time, that handle is @Let'sTalkTrio. I'd like to take a moment to thank our honorary members of the Let's Talk Trio podcast, Roderick Chambers, Tony Ho, Scott Kendall, and Susan Cramp. The Let's Talk Trio podcast team is John Russell, audio engineer, music producer and composer, and post-production editor. Amelia Castañeda, script supervisor, marketing manager, social media manager, and producer. Juan Rivas, executive producer and host. This episode was recorded Sunday, October 8th, 2023. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.